Welcome to Healthcare du Jour, where we dish up and digest the latest in healthcare. For the next 30 minutes, sit back as we bring you insight, commentary, and discussion on trending topics to the table, all expertly served up by our host and his guests. Healthcare du Jour is sponsored by SA Ignite, the law offices of Myrick O'Connell, and the Compliancy Group. And now here is our host, Matt Fisher.
Welcome back, and thank you for joining as we dive into the hottest topics in healthcare. I'm your host, Matt Fisher. On the menu today is Regina Holliday, a well-known patient advocate and founder of the Walking Gallery, and I can't tell everyone listening enough how excited I am to have Regina join today.
I'm excited to be here.
Well, thank you for coming on. So, for people who might not necessarily be familiar with you, can you just give everyone a brief background as to who you are and what you do?
Sure. Okay, so back in 2009, I was a parent of special needs children, and I worked in a toy store, and I would do neighborhood murals, and that was my life. And then my husband got cancer, and, well, he got diagnosed with cancer. And we went on a horrible roller coaster ride of care through 5 facilities, and the number one problem was we couldn't get access to the electronic medical record, which meant that he did not get the care he should have gotten, and it meant that as a family we went through sort of torture. So he had 12 weeks from the point of diagnosis for him to live, and it was a really hard time. And during that 12 weeks, I saw how really messed up healthcare was, especially when it came to technology, because working in a toy store, I was using computer systems that were better than the hospitals we were in. And I thought, this is really messed up, that toys and toy stores have better technology. And I was an artist. So I thought, what can I do to rapidly make people aware how problematic care is in this country? I thought I can paint giant murals about it. And since I lived in Washington, D.C., painting giant murals there meant people pretty rapidly started paying attention. And so folks like my husband could get the kind of care that they deserve.
Right. So, and I think your mentioning of the painting is probably one of the ways a lot of people have learned about who you are. Which I think is probably a nice way to introduce what the Walking Gallery is. I've certainly seen members when I've been at various conferences, and it's very powerful to see what you've produced.
Yeah, so I started with physical concrete brick mortar murals. They're great, but they can't move and they can't walk and they can't tell their story besides where they are located. And then in 2011, I came up with this idea called the Walking Gallery. And the idea was, what if the murals walked? And what if they were about other people than just us? What if everybody could tell their healthcare patient story on the back of their business suit jacket, and they could walk into a really big conference like HIMSS and make people start paying attention to what the human story is? Data's important, but why do we need that data? We need that data so people's life stories can be better.
Right, and I think what you just said, the human component to it, is really important because I've personally only been to HIMSS once, and actually that's where we got to meet in person for the first time back in March. But I've seen the jackets at I lived up in New England, and I've seen the jackets at a bunch of more regional conferences. So what you just said about being able to spread it out by putting it onto the jacket is definitely bearing true.
Oh, yeah, it's amazing. So every member of the Walking Gallery has to wear their jacket 2 to 3 times per year at medical conferences and public events in the goal of sharing the story.
Right, and how many members are there at this point?
We are so close to 400. We are at 396 members at this point, and we're on 5 continents.
Wow, that is very impressive. And given how many people you have, and it sounds like it's still growing, kind of ties into one question I got through Twitter leading up to our chat today from Sarah Benight, which is, how do you become a member?
Oh, okay. So I did this blog post on my blog, Regina Holliday's Medical Advocacy blog, and it says, how do you join the Walking Gallery? And if you go to that blog post, it tells you exactly how, which is just spectacular. But it's really simple. You say, I want to join the Walking Gallery. And you email me the story of your life, and you mail me a jacket. I'm the primary artist that paints in the Walking Gallery, though we have 45 artists. So people can, if they already are an artist, join as an artist, or they can paint a friend's jacket. That'd be great. You only have to ever paint one jacket to be a member of the Walking Gallery as an artist. Since we do not charge for the physical painting of the jackets, that means I do most of the work just because, it's time intensive. It usually takes anywhere between 6 to 16 hours to do a jacket. as far as active painting time, and at this point I've painted like 375 of them.
That is a very large percentage of them.
Yes. It's over 400. It's like 420 jackets at this point. So it's one of those things. A few people have more than one jacket. There's a few people who their story diverged. It changed completely, and they got jacket 2. And one hopes it was a positive divergence, but unfortunately, oftentimes it is not.
Right. So with all the jackets that you've participated in creating and seen, do you have any particular ones that are the most impactful for you?
You never ask a parent which baby they love the most.
I can understand that, although at the moment I only have one.
Golly, all of them are impactful. Probably the one that's most controversial is Casey Quinlan's second jacket. See, when meaningful use stage 2's requirement that 5% of the population in a facility be able to get to the medical record, when that came out, we thought that was pretty low, a low bar, but we thought, hey, if 5%, that they're trying, right? Well, there was pushback for that, and they said, if a facility can prove in a period of time that one patient in their entire facility looked at the portal, then they meet the requirement for patient participation.
Right.
That was super aggravating for us in the patient community. So Casey Quinlan's jacket is a hand flipping the bird, and it says, I got your one patient here.
Yes, no.
Yes.
Yeah. Tracking the meaningful use changes from the legal side, even from that perspective, that reduction from 5% to just one person was.
Which could be a staff person. I mean, that's. I mean, it doesn't even have to be an actual patient. It could be a nurse that happens to be treated at that facility. I mean, they are patient, but I mean,
yes.
It's so aggravating for us in the patient community.
So when you keep talking about the patient community, what do you qualify, or how do you define the patient community?
People who self-define as patient first.
And is there anyone who does not do that? Have you've encountered?
Well, there's tons of people who don't do that. Most people I meet at medical conferences don't do that. They work for a company, they are a tech person, they're a doctor, they're a nurse. They're privately at my easel, they come to me and tell me their real story, quietly. See, I give speeches, and I'm a very good speaker, and after I finish speaking, people want to give me Q&A. And I say, you don't need to do that, because no one's going to ask me, hardly anyone ever asks me a question on stage. They're like, oh, no. I'm like, no, they don't, because the stuff they're going to ask me is so personal, they can't in front of people. So they're going to come up to me at the easel, and then they're going to tell me the horrific thing that happened to them. And then they're probably going to join the walking gallery at some point. But they can't say it publicly because they potentially could get fired, or it could affect their ability to work with a client. So they can't say this stuff very easily. And so, no, they don't define as patients first, because they're really worried about what that will do to the long-term trajectory of employment within healthcare. So there are people who do this, but we're all the people who are like, okay, fire us. Like what more can you do to us than's already been done? We've already lost someone we love so very, very much. So we're going to be honest and say how, in many cases, the system's messed up. And we have the ability to do that because, we don't reflect an organization. We just reflect people.
Right.
Right.
So it's very interesting the way you just described, kind of the two sides that I think so many of us end up maintaining, which is that professional persona, and then what is arguably maybe the truer personal side of things that doesn't always get to be shared as openly. Yeah,
and that's part of the reason why we have the problems we have within healthcare, because we've got that division, and it's almost like the emperor's new clothes. Everybody knows there's a problem. There's a major problem, but they don't want to talk about it. They don't want to talk about it publicly.
Right. And do you feel like there are tools or discussions developing that are helping to bring some of those conversations more out into the open?
Yeah, I mean, of course, there wasn't. Those of us who speak about this on Twitter and Facebook and all these different social media realms and at conferences, you used to not see this stuff. I mean, social media sort of changed everything, because it used to be a whole bunch of patients had to be represented by an organization. So there'd be a big foundational nonprofit that would get a seat at the table. and it could be, AARP or American Cancer Society or association. It could be any kind of organization, right? And that one person would represent thousands of other people. But when you represent thousands of other people in an organizational way that's tied, its funding is tied to donation, it tends to be hard to speak your mind sometimes. So the beautiful thing that happens in social media is all of a sudden just people could represent people without a foundation behind them, without a traditional organization behind them. And all of a sudden, more voices started to come out here. So that one of the best things that ever happened in healthcare was the advent of social media.
Yes, no, that definitely seems to tap into what is a common perception, which is, as you said, social media has given every single individual a voice and the ability to broadcast it.
Yeah, it's been pretty astounding.
And it also seems like the use that occurs is continually changing. I think people are finding different ways to use the different platforms.
Oh, very much. Like you just in the 7 years I've been using social media, I've seen major changes. What Facebook was. 7 years ago, I would not put a picture on Facebook because I was terrified they would steal it from me.
Right. Yes.
It was just, yeah. So it's just, the world changed. Things moved on, and different platforms are good for different things. But what has been astounding and spectacular is before I was known as anybody in healthcare, I was tweeting, and the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation was tweeting back to me. I was a no one, but I was a voice, and they were responding to that voice. And it was spectacular because in the years past that never happened. If you were a nobody, you got to talk to no one. And all of a sudden that changed. The gatekeepers went away, and we can all talk. The challenge that we have as we go forward is to find out when everyone's talking, who's listening, and what action should we take.
So with that evolving use, and kind of, as you said, kind of figuring out who's listening and trying to determine what actions to take, how has your approach changed in how you utilize social media to accomplish what you're trying to do?
Of course, Facebook has become a much better tool than it used to be. The groups and the pages and all that you can tailor to specific communities has been spectacular. Twitter still tends to be a good choice if you're really policy-driven, but I have noticed a softening of that platform if you're not. So you've got to factor that into your time. Of course, the visual image. So the embracing of the visual image within social media happened first with general consumers. It's happened very slowly with healthcare, but it's much more viral and it's much more spread. And so that's one of the beauties of the walking gallery often is that I have visual images. So visual images are shared really, really rapidly. And
right.
The conversation that happens around visual images is often an emotional one that doesn't have text, which is spectacular because you can get things under the radar so fast. Because there's no keywords. It's all pictures. If it's all pictures and we're talking about pictures, there's this entire dialogue going on that the powers that be doesn't even understand is going on.
Right. I think you're right. It's as you said, it feels like most of the things that end up going viral, and I don't think you can force that to occur, but most of the things that feel like they go viral are either purely image-driven or have an image as a major component to it.
Yep, because human beings are visual. And we just haven't figured that out in healthcare yet. Yeah, look at an EMR system. How many of them have you seen that are visual and not glorified PDFs?
Right. I was going to ask kind of how would you propose to bring the visual into healthcare?
Oh, golly. I mean, pictures. It's like, like my first mural that I did when I first began was an anatomy chart face page for your EMR, basically. It was the idea of what if you took the human being's skeletal structure, a really simplified drawing, and showed all the points of pain and all the problems this patient has, and color code the whole thing. And then have a reference off to the side that's based on the color code. Because we as human beings within seconds can grasp the intent of a visual image, whereas it takes minutes to read. So if everybody could see that kind of visual presentation of the patient, where the face page, the first thing you see on a form, like on the actual computer screen, is a visual, your likelihood of harming that patient becomes a lot less because you have a comprehensive concept of what's wrong with this person.
Right. That really does sound like a very interesting approach to it, and it feels like it's one that's been absent from most of the dialogue. I'll freely admit that I'm never involved in terms of the development of these things, but just even following along on social media or in other places, it feels like the driving a visual aspect to it is a missing piece to the conversation.
You are correct.
So given that you're trying to kind of push that visualization side, do you feel like you're having success in engaging any particular portion of the healthcare industry, or is that still very much a work in progress?
Oh, it's very much a work in progress. I talk to people about this stuff all the time, and oftentimes that's a great idea is what I hear, and then they go back to whatever it is they're doing. Part of the problem is, for the longest time, the focus of this system is not the patient nor the family. It's a doctor and billing system. It's codes and billing, and it's not focused on making sure a person's educated about their own condition. So the entire module was designed with that in mind, based upon a paper world. So it's all glorified paper, and none of the ability to branch out and hot link and expand that, for instance, the internet has. I mean, we don't have to have this antiquated technology like we have. We have it because people who are in charge are comfortable with a system that's been in place for a very long time. We also have an educational system that rewards the person who can memorize static data. Well, then that's what you get. You get static systems that don't tend to grow and change as the reality changes around them.
No, I think that's a very fair point. And in terms of having a static system or constraints that have driven this in a particular direction, I have a feeling that you'll agree that the meaningful use program, while arguably very good in terms of getting people to think in an electronic manner, ended up putting us in a place where there's now a lot of work yet to be done.
Oh, well, golly, yes, of course there's a lot of work to be done. When we hit the hospital system in 2009, when we were looking at systems in 2009, I was seeing technology in hospitals and facilities that was based on the late 1970s and early 1980s. This was 2009. How incredibly arrogant would any business seem to expect to leap forward 25 years in 6? That's the kind of, yeah, there's a ton of work to do. But in 2009, so many facilities were still on paper. They weren't even using computers at all. It was still a paper-based system. In the real world, that had not been the case for a very, very long time when it comes to businesses. So this is a major leapfrogging that's happened during the meaningful use time frame. Does more need to happen? Oh, yes. And we need to desperately hire more outside of the industry into healthcare, because the expectations outside the industry are very high, and the expectations with inside the industry often are very low, because that's where they've always worked and that's what they've always seen, and they don't realize how very different technology has gotten. So we need way, way more cross-fertilization of the kind of employees that we have.
Yeah, and that would seem to tap into all the discussions of trying to bring, whether you want to call it the retail experience or, the Uberization, or really pick your kind of designation to it, but bringing the technological advancements and the utilization of technology from other industries into healthcare and getting, all the things that we can do in our day-to-day lives to actually be utilized within healthcare as well.
Right. Online banking, for instance. Online banking is not just being able to get to your bank 24 hours a day. Online banking is also getting your customers to do some of the work for you. Right? So
Yes.
Used to be you had to go to a teller to do all this stuff, and you had to do it within 9 to 5, and you don't have to do any of that anymore. You can keep 7 years of data on your banking right in front of you and skew to just 1 month of 1 year and look at your buying patterns during that time frame. And then you can cross-reference that against your credit card history and see patterns within your own life behavior. You can do all that, not in healthcare. And it makes absolutely no sense.
Yeah, and kind of taking the banking analogy, it's, that information seems to be available everywhere as well. It's the banking industry. You go from one bank to the next, and they're going to be able to pull your financial information.
Because they decided to work together. So I don't know if you follow the Learning Health Systems and the Cantor Foundation. They did a wonderful presentation about that. It was called Chaotic Development, because when the first Visa cards came out, that was a whole bunch of banks that were competition. They were in competition with each other, agreeing to work together and share data, share these logons, in the idea that people would spend more and use their services more. And they were right.
Right, and yes.
Yes.
I think you're starting to get it feels like you're starting to get slow and widespread examples of that working together. I think the one that's coming to mind is a recent article I saw, I think through Kaiser Health News, about a group of emergency rooms, I think in the Oakland area or somewhere in that Bay Area, about the emergency rooms coming together and trying to make sure that the patient information is flowing among those different ERs. So if people were trying to hop from ER to ER, each facility would actually know the care that had just been rendered.
There's a lot of that. Unfortunately, a lot of it's actually coming from the concern about opioid abuse and not concern about patients getting better care.
Yes, no, I would definitely agree with you that what's being termed as the opioid crisis is driving a lot of concerns. But in terms of trying to enhance that coordination, as the government and others seem to be pushing into value-based care, do you feel like that, one, do you actually believe that that's going to happen? And two, do you think that will end up helping with the issue of putting the patient at the center?
Yeah, I mean, value-based care is instrumental at keeping the system that we have right now, where there is a private pay kind of component to our current healthcare system. Without value-based care, that system will completely self-destruct within a few years, and we will have to go to some kind of universal program if we can't get this in line. So value-based care basically was making sure that patients are getting cared for appropriately. They're not getting infections. They're not getting unnecessary testing done to them, things that work in a fee-for-service model and are acceptable in a fee-for-service model that keeps the hospital bottom line going really smooth. In value-based care, that doesn't work. You're going to get pinged for it. You're going to get pinged for every time you hurt somebody. It's not okay. In no other system do you pay for being hurt, only in healthcare. And so to try to make this system that we have, where there's 4 different players within it, work, you have to embrace a value-based care model. Now, I know there's major pushback, and a lot of people want to say the fee-for-service, but you're going to shoot yourself in the foot. And it's like either accept some change that will improve the system that somewhat is as is, or, like a lot of people want to see, blow the whole thing up and change it into something else.
Yeah, and I think even if and I think you're partially saying this, but it's as you go into value-based care, I mean, to some degree, you are fundamentally changing how the healthcare industry has operated for the past however many number of years.
Well, because it's sick care.
Yes, you're going from, as you just said, from sick care to well care, which is to
totally different model.
Yes.
Is it a model that can still make money? Yes. I mean, how many people pay for gym memberships and pay to go to the spa and pay for child care, and they pay for lots of things within society? But healthcare is never considered those things their purview. But the hospital in your community should be the center hub of socialization within your community. That's where all these wonderful classes should happen. That's where there should be picnics and grounds and places where children can play. And it should be a place of health and healing. And in the past, it has not. But if the future of care, that's the direction it's going.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you that for hospital facilities to survive, they have to completely shift what the goals are. Because if you don't, then the money's not going to be there, because everyone's going to be working to try and keep the beds empty, unless it's something where you absolutely can't avoid it.
Right. I mean, yes, there's always going to be sickness in this world. That's not. But it's one of those things that some of the sickness doesn't have to happen, and we don't have to have NICU babies if we're not having babies before 39 weeks, and if we're inducing cesarean or having cesarean sections electively, that causes babies in the NICU. Well, guess what? We stopped that, and now all of a sudden the rates nationwide are dropping. Well, that means you don't have babies in the NICU. That's a bottom line issue, right? You could offer sick child care. That would rock. There are so many parents who can't go to their jobs because there's no place to take their sick child. You
Yes,
see? It's
I
just a
can
matter of
sympathize with
changing.
that one.
Yes, you can, totally. So the major thing is you've just got to change your vision of what your future is. It doesn't mean you have to close. It just means that you're going to go in a different path.
Yeah, as you say, you change how you interact with the community, and instead of being viewed as a place where you never want to end up, you change the perception so it's where you help holistically and can be not, I hate to say it as a contributing part of the community, because I think even now they are to some degree, but you change the manner of the contribution so it's viewed as a positive as opposed to, as I said, a place you'd want to avoid.
Correct.
So with all of this that is going on, kind of what are you currently working on, and what are some of your plans for the near future?
Oh, so I'm working on this building here in Grantsville, Maryland, where I live, that I'm calling Salt and Pepper Studios, home of the Walking Gallery, because up until now the Walking Gallery has been a literally walking movement, and I've been painting in my studio desperately trying to keep up with all the people who want to join the movement. So I thought it would be really nice if we could have a studio and we could invite artists and patients to come here and paint and learn how to become advocates within their own lives. And so I've been working very, very hard this spring and summer getting that dream to reality, and our hope is to open in the fall. We actually are laying our ADA ramp with concrete tomorrow.
Oh wow, that's incredible.
Yes.
So, and if I recall seeing correctly through social media, you hosted an in-person conference at your new location.
Well, we had a dedication. So the conference is down the road near this beautiful bridge in my community. It's a very beautiful historic community, and we hosted the conference there. But we did a dedication of the building. Okay. So we dedicated it to its cause, which is helping people.
So, and what's your goal with that new brick and mortar site?
So we're going to be having classes in the fall, teaching people art, doing poetry jams and all that kind of good stuff. But also we'll be having patients that are like recovering cancer patients and artists coming for 3 weeks at a time and either working on their art and helping with the gallery or working on their vision of becoming an advocate.
Right. So it really sounds like a way to continue ensuring that one, you're not the only person who's working on, who's doing work, but two, also
you got to scale up. We're scaling up to brick and mortar.
And actually, it's not even just scaling up to brick and mortar. It sounds like, but it's really scaling up the reach and being able to hit so many more pieces of the industry.
Yes. I mean, we got to keep growing. We got to keep just changing. It's just like we're counseling others to change. We have to be willing to change.
Yes. No, nothing can remain static and hope to survive.
Correct. You got to keep going.
So, and then I've heard you say recently that there might be some political aspirations in your future. So
yeah. So I used to live in the District of Columbia, which I don't know if you know this, but there are no elected officers. I mean, you can't. There's no representation for the District of Columbia ever. So
or there's no representation with a quote unquote real voice.
Correct. Like if you have a problem at your school, you have to get the Department of Education involved, which we did. So that's how problematic. I live in Maryland now. I live in a state. We have elected offices, and my goal is to run for mayor next year.
Mayor of in the town where you live?
Yeah. Well, I don't think you can be mayor of a town you don't live in.
That's probably a very fair point.
But it's small and it's a place to get started. But I think that if we're really going to change things in healthcare, we've got to get elected officials that work on that.
Yeah. No, I think that makes sense because it's. I think it touches back on part of what you were saying earlier, that the government is part of what's created the system, and to change, you have to be part of the body that sets the bulk of the rules. You're correct. To make them, you have to be part of them, and you can guide and lead toward better legislation. So maybe, I see we're starting to get close to the end of our time, but on that front, have you had any currently elected officials who are a part of the Walking Gallery or who have expressed interest in helping or in trying to work with you? We have not elected. We've appointed. So Karen is a member of the Walking Gallery. Todd Park is a member of the Walking Gallery. He's not a physician. Susanna Fox, she's a member of the Walking Gallery. So we have a lot of appointed. Elected, not yet. There was someone running in Virginia
So Angela Lynn.
Okay. Well, hopefully that is a very positive sign, and if nothing else, I'm sure you'll be able to help start that trend as you pursue your goals. But believe it or not, we are out of time already. So I would very much like to thank you, Regina, for joining and for having a great conversation today.
Well, thank you so much, and people can follow me on Twitter, Facebook, whatever, Regina Holliday.
Yeah, and thank you to everyone listening. Keep the dialogue going and connect with me at #HCDEJURE on Twitter. And as Regina said, connect with her on social media as well. I'm Matt Fisher. Until next time.